feel like that kind of ties into the fact that like Kristaps Porzingis, the big headliner when we got him and Drew Holiday and made that championship run. I feel as though that when you're looking at Porzingis and his impact, like just his presence on the floor is substantial enough to be like make shooters weary. Is like, okay, I can't drive the paint because there's a 7'3" Lafian just standing there waiting to alter reject my shot. And you realize that he wasn't available for a good chunk of the beginning of the year because he was recovering from that injury last year that he suffered in the playoffs. And obviously the paint defense took a major hit when he's not playing. So I feel like, and we'll get into this later on in the pod, but the health of KP and JB are super important if they want to repeat for the title, for the NBA title. And it all starts with the defense. And we'll talk about Missoula ball and defense versus offense, how we go about like it in a playoff perspective, because there's a very little room for error. You're not playing the Washington Wizards. You're not playing the Utah Jazz every night. You're playing against OKC who had an historic season, Cleveland, who's looked so good for so much of the year. And, the game completely changes when it comes playoff time. Very minimal room for error in that regard.
Yeah, and we'll get into this in a little bit too, but you expect rotations to tighten up a little bit. Matchups are going to look different on the floor in the playoffs. That's just the way it usually goes. And the thing, one of the things I wrote down from just kind of researching overall this season in terms of team stats for franchise history for the Celtics, I was just looking at a lot of those numbers because they kind of stand out because it's so different since Joe Mazzulla took over. The Celtics finished this year with their lowest relative pace in franchise history. And what that means is relative to the pace of the rest of the league, they were significantly slower and play a much slower brand of basketball to the league average. They just play so much more in the half court. And that's not necessarily a good or a bad thing. It's just their strategy. But it's clear that it's a concerted effort with Mazzulla because it's been a steady decline in pace since he took over. And the way they define pace is an estimate of the number of possessions per 48 minutes in a game. And so in Joe's first year in 2022-23, they were at 98.5. And relative to the rest of the league, they were